Freddie Doyle had cleared 400 tables at the Downbeat Club without a single night worth remembering. Then, on a raw Thursday in February 1949, the greatest voice in America walked in through the side door in a plain gray coat and sat where nobody would look for her. And what Louis Armstrong did from the stage 40 minutes later would stay with Freddie until the day he died. The Downbeat sat halfway down 52nd Street, between a pawn shop and a shuttered hat store. 9:20 at night. Freddie was 19, bussing glasses for tips, hiding a notebook of songs he'd never shown a living soul. He had $11 and a dream he told no one. He didn't know yet that the woman in the gray coat couldn't legally sing a note in the whole city of New York. He only knew she looked like she was trying to disappear. You have to understand what 52nd Street was in those years. They called it Swing Street. Half a block of basement doorways, and behind every one a bandstand, a smoke haze, and somebody playing like the night would never come back. Freddie had grown up 2 trains away in Brooklyn. He'd talked his way into the busboy job by lying about his age, and he'd stayed because down here, for the price of carrying other men's dirty glasses, he got to stand 10 feet from the greatest musicians alive. He wanted to be one of them. Not a player, a writer. He filled a drugstore notebook with verses he was too frightened to sing out loud. His mother worked nights cleaning offices in a building downtown, and she came home at dawn smelling of ammonia and other people's coffee. His father was a name nobody in the house said out loud. Music was the one door in Freddie's life that hadn't been slammed shut, and he was too scared to walk through it. He had reasons to be scared. He'd tried once, at 15, at a school talent night. He got 2 lines in, his voice cracked, a couple of older boys laughed, and he walked off the stage and never went back. 4 years later, he could still hear that laugh. It sat in his chest every time he opened the notebook. So he wrote in secret, and he sang to no one, and he told himself that carrying other men's glasses was close enough to the music to be enough. "You gonna stand there dreaming, or you gonna clear 4?" the head waiter, a heavy-set man named Saul, said most nights. Freddie always laughed it off. "Dreaming's free, Saul," he'd say. It was the only bold thing he ever said out loud, and he only said it because it was a joke. That Thursday, Louis Armstrong and his all-stars were booked into the Downbeat for a rare, small-room week. The place held maybe 140 people. It was full by 9, thick with cigarette smoke and the smell of cheap bourbon and wet wool coats. Freddie was folding napkins near the coat rack when the side door opened, cold air spilled in, and a woman slipped through it alone. She kept her chin down and moved to the worst table in the house, a 2-top jammed against the back wall, half behind a pillar, where the waiters forgot you and the band couldn't see you. She ordered nothing but a glass of water. She kept her coat on. Freddie almost didn't look twice. Then she lifted her face toward the empty bandstand, and the light caught it, and his hands went still around a stack of glasses. He knew that face. Everybody who loved music knew that face. He had a scratched-up record of hers at home that he played so soft his mother wouldn't hear it through the wall. It was Billie Holiday. And Freddie, 19 years old and terrified of his own voice, understood something in that moment that most of the room never would. Billie Holiday could not sing in New York. Not in this club, not in any club in the 5 boroughs. 2 years before, they'd taken her cabaret card, the little license the city-made performers carry, and without it, she was barred from every stage in town where a drink was served. The greatest singer in America, locked out of her own city. So she had come to do the only thing left to her. She had come to sit in the dark and listen. "Water," Saul muttered, passing Freddie with a tray. "Table 19. Some lady nursing a water all night." He didn't know who she was. Freddie didn't tell him. He carried the water to table 19 himself. Up close, she was smaller than her voice. She thanked him quietly and didn't look up, and Freddie, who had never once in his life said the bold thing, heard himself say it anyway. "I know who you are, Miss Holliday," he whispered. "I won't tell nobody." For a second she went very still. Then she looked at him, really looked, and something in her face softened by a single degree. "You're a good boy," she said. "Go on now, before somebody notices you noticing." He went. His heart was going like a snare drum. He watched her from across the room for the next half hour, and he saw what nobody else saw, the greatest singer in America mouthing along, silent, to a band she wasn't allowed to join. Then the lights dropped, and Louis Armstrong walked out onto the little stage. The room came apart with noise. Louis grinned that impossible grin, white handkerchief already in his hand, and lifted the golden horn, and the first notes of Sleepy Time Down South filled the basement like warm water filling a glass. He played 3 numbers. He mopped his brow and told a joke that made the front tables roar. He was, as always, the happiest man in any room he stood in. And then, between songs, he did something Freddie had never seen him do. He stopped scanning the front rows. He looked past the lights. He looked to the back of the room, to the dark two-top behind the pillar, table 19. He had found her. Louis Armstrong and Billie Holiday had known each other for 20 years. They'd made a picture together in Hollywood, and long before that they had come up in the same brutal, beautiful world of clubs and late trains and rooms that loved your voice and cared nothing for the person carrying it. He knew exactly what the city had done to her. He knew what it cost a singer like that, maybe the finest of them all, to sit in a room full of music with a lock on her own throat, listening to men do freely the one thing she was forbidden to do at all. For a long moment he just looked at her across 140 strangers. Nobody else turned. Nobody else knew. A man told a joke at the bar. A waiter dropped a spoon. The world went on being ordinary for everyone in that basement, except 2 people who had known each other since before either one was famous. Then Louis Armstrong leaned into the microphone, and in that gravel voice the whole world loved, he said something Freddie would repeat for the rest of his life. "We got a queen in the house tonight," Louis said. "She can't sing in this town. Ain't that a thing? So this next one, we gonna sing it for her." He didn't say her name. He didn't have to. He didn't point. He didn't turn her into a spectacle. He simply lifted the horn, and the all-stars fell in soft behind him. And Louis Armstrong began to play "I'll Be Seeing You." Slow, aching. Every note bent toward a table in the back that most of the room had never once looked at. Freddie stood frozen by the coat rack with a tray going cold in his hands. And in the dark, at table 19, Billie Holiday, who was not allowed to make a sound on any stage in New York, put her hand over her mouth and her shoulders began to shake. She didn't run out. That was the thing Freddie always came back to. A weaker person would have fled the room. She stayed. She sat through every note of it with tears running down under the hand pressed to her face, and when Louis finished and the room burst into applause for a song they thought was just a pretty ballad, she was the only one in the house who understood what had really happened. Louis set down the horn, wiped his forehead with the white handkerchief, and grinned like nothing at all had passed between them. He went straight into a bright, roaring number, and the night rolled on, and 140 people never knew they just watched one legend hand another one back her dignity for the length of a single song. When the set ended, Billie Holiday stood, buttoned her plain gray coat, and moved toward the side door. On her way past the coat rack, she stopped in front of Freddie. She reached into her small handbag, took out a folded cocktail napkin and a stub of pencil, and wrote something on it, leaning it against the wall. "You said you had songs in you," she said, though he never remembered telling her that. Maybe it was just on his face. "Don't you do what this city does. Don't you lock your own throat, baby." She pressed the napkin into his hand and was gone through the cold door before he could answer. Freddie Doyle unfolded the napkin under the coat rack light. She had written 8 words. "Sing it before somebody tells you you can't. B.H." He kept that napkin for 62 years. He did not become famous. Life is not that tidy. He got drafted, came home, married a girl named Alice from the Bronx, drove a delivery truck for the Daily News for 31 years. But somewhere in there, in a union hall in Queens on an ordinary Tuesday, a scared man in his 40s finally stood up and sang one of the songs from his drugstore notebook. His hands shook the whole time. He said afterward it was the bravest thing he ever did, and that he only did it because of 8 words on a napkin and a night on 52nd Street when he watched a man refuse to let the city win. He sang at church. He sang at weddings. He sang to his grandchildren until his voice went. He never had a record, never had a stage bigger than a folding chair hall. It didn't matter. He had walked through the door. Billie Holiday died in 1949's Long Shadow, 10 years later, still fighting for the little car that let her sing in her own city. Police at her hospital bed to the very end. Louis Armstrong outlived her by 12 years, and never once, in any interview, told the story of the night at the downbeat. Whatever passed between those 2 old friends in a smoky basement, he kept it. Some kindnesses aren't meant to be spent for applause. Freddie kept the napkin in a Bible on his nightstand. When his granddaughter asked him, near the end, why an old delivery driver had a stranger's napkin pressed between the pages of Psalms, he told her the whole story. The gray coat, the water she never drank, the song sung to a table nobody was looking at, the 8 words in a stranger's hand. The most famous man in America looked past 140 people, Freddie told her, to sing to the one who was hurting the most. And then he never told a soul, because he didn't do it to be seen doing it. That's the whole thing, baby. That's the whole thing right there. Alice, his wife, used to say she could always tell which songs came out of the notebook, because those were the only ones he closed his eyes to sing. She said he sang them like he was still a little afraid, and that the fear was somehow part of why they were beautiful. He never got over the boy on the talent night stage, not entirely. He just stopped letting that boy decide. He died in 2011, 81 years old, in the same borough where the man with the golden horn had lived out his own last years. His granddaughter framed the napkin. It hangs in a hallway in Queens today, 8 faded words behind glass, a few miles from a little house on 107th Street in Corona, where Louis Armstrong once lived. A man who knew that the loudest thing you can do for someone is to play soft and aim it at the dark and never mention it again. 1,800 nights that room held music. Only one of them changed a frightened boy into a man who sang. And he'd tell you, if you asked, that it wasn't the trumpet that did it. It was watching a great man be kind when no one was keeping score. If this story stayed with you, take a moment to subscribe and leave a like. It helps us keep these old memories alive. Have you ever watched someone do a great kindness quietly and never say a word about it afterward? Tell us about them in the comments.